Your excessive water usage violates community conservation standards and threatens our entire development sustainability. We're cutting your water service immediately until you comply with mandatory usage restrictions. That's what Bradley Whitmore screamed at me while directing his maintenance crew to shut off my water meter. His pink dress shirt stretched tight across his bloated gut, black dress pants riding up as he gestured wildly with his clipboard toward the modest irrigation system that watered my vegetable garden. The smell of his expensive cologne mixed with morning dew and the ominous silence of my water pressure dropping to zero as this suburban dictator stood there absolutely convinced he'd just eliminated a water waster who threatened his precious development's resource management. I'm Colonel Samuel Harrison, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, retired, and for 38 years I've owned and operated Harrison Dam, the 847-acre reservoir that supplies water to over 12,000 homes throughout Jefferson County, including every single house in Bradley's Pine Ridge Estates development. But standing there in my red and black checkered flannel shirt, watching this entitled developer cut off water service to the man who literally controls the dam that keeps his entire 900-home community from dying of thirst, I felt the cold satisfaction of knowing exactly how this would end. What Bradley didn't know was that in exactly 16 months, he'd be standing in federal court facing racketeering charges for systematic theft of water services, while his entire development faced mandatory evacuation because the dam owner he'd been harassing had legally terminated water supply to all 900 homes, leaving his multi-million-dollar community worthless and uninhabitable. And I'd be the one sitting in the witness stand, explaining how Bradley's water theft had violated federal dam management regulations that gave me the authority to protect my reservoir from illegal consumption. What would you do if some HOA tyrant cut off your water service for violations while living in a development that depends entirely on water you control? Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and tell me your state, because this story will show you exactly how to destroy illegal water theft using 38 years of Army Corps of Engineers experience and the legal authority to terminate service to entire communities that violate water rights agreements. My name is Colonel Samuel Harrison, and 3 years ago I thought selling a small portion of my family's 2,400-acre ranch to Whitmore Development Corporation would provide a reasonable partnership that allowed responsible development while preserving the majority of our property for continued agricultural use and water management operations. After spending 4 decades building Harrison Dam into one of Colorado's most reliable water supply systems, I was looking forward to working with developers who understood that water rights and environmental stewardship were the foundation of sustainable community development. The Harrison family had owned this land since 1887, when my great-grandfather Jeremiah Harrison claimed 2,400 acres under the Homestead Act and began the agricultural operations that would eventually evolve into Colorado's most sophisticated private water management system. Jeremiah had recognized the valley's potential for water collection and storage, building the original earthwork dam in 1892 to capture snowmelt from the surrounding mountains for irrigation of crops that fed growing Colorado communities. My grandfather, Colonel William Harrison, had expanded the dam during the 1920s while serving as an Army Corps of Engineers officer, adding concrete reinforcement and spillway systems that transformed the original farm pond into a legitimate reservoir capable of supplying water to multiple communities throughout Jefferson County. The dam had weathered the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and 2 world wars while providing reliable water service that supported agricultural development and early suburban growth throughout the region. My father, Major Robert Harrison, had modernized the entire operation during the 1960s after his own military service, installing pumping systems, treatment facilities, and distribution networks that met federal water quality standards while expanding service to over 8,000 homes throughout Jefferson County. By the time I inherited the operation in 1985 after my own Army Corps of Engineers career, Harrison Dam was supplying water to 12 separate communities under long-term contracts that provided stable revenue while ensuring responsible water management. The dam itself represented a masterpiece of military engineering expertise, holding 847 acres of pristine mountain water behind a concrete and earthwork structure that had been continuously upgraded to meet federal safety standards. The reservoir collected snowmelt from over 12,000 acres of mountain watershed, providing reliable water supply even during drought years when municipal systems struggled to meet demand. My professional background as an Army Corps of Engineers colonel specializing in water infrastructure had led me to continuously improve the dam's capacity, safety systems, and distribution networks while maintaining the agricultural operations that had sustained the Harrison family for 5 generations. The combination of water sales, revenue, and agricultural income had allowed me to preserve the majority of our ranch while providing essential water services to growing suburban communities that depended on our reliable supply. For 38 years, I'd operated Harrison Dam as both a family legacy and a public service, providing water to communities throughout Jefferson County while maintaining agricultural operations that supported local food production and preserved open space that defined our region's character. The water contracts I'd negotiated with various communities included specific provisions about conservation, responsible usage, and the mutual respect between water suppliers and water consumers that made long-term partnerships possible. The trouble started when Bradley Whitmore approached me in 2021 about purchasing 400 acres of ranch land for his Pine Ridge Estates development. At 59, Bradley had the appearance of someone who'd spent decades manipulating other people's resources for personal profit, while never understanding the actual work required to create and maintain the infrastructure that supported his lifestyle. Bradley's initial proposal seemed reasonable. A luxury residential development featuring 900 homes designed to blend with the natural environment, while providing modern amenities for wealthy buyers seeking rural lifestyle without rural responsibilities. He emphasized his commitment to water conservation, environmental stewardship, and maintaining the character of our agricultural community while creating housing for families who would appreciate and protect the natural resources that made our valley special. The water supply contract we negotiated included specific provisions about usage limits, conservation requirements, and Bradley's acknowledgement that his development would depend entirely on Harrison Dam for water service under terms that protected both his residents and my reservoir's long-term sustainability. Bradley had signed agreements recognizing my authority as dam owner to monitor usage, enforce conservation measures, and terminate service to developments that violated water rights agreements. For the first 18 months after Pine Ridge Estates construction began, our relationship remained professional and cooperative. Bradley's development team worked with my water management staff to install efficient distribution systems, implement conservation technologies, and educate new residents about responsible water usage in a semi-arid environment where every gallon represented precious mountain snowmelt. The problems began when Bradley discovered that his water costs were higher than he'd anticipated, and his residents were using more water than his marketing projections had assumed. Luxury homes with large lawns, swimming pools, and extensive landscaping consumed significantly more water than the conservation-oriented usage patterns Bradley had promised during contract negotiations. Instead of implementing the conservation measures required by our agreement, Bradley began pressuring me to provide additional water at reduced rates, while claiming that his development's economic success was more important than water conservation or contract compliance. He argued that his 900 homes represented economic development that benefited the entire community and deserved preferential water pricing. The relationship deteriorated when Bradley started questioning my authority to monitor water usage and enforce conservation requirements that were clearly specified in our signed contracts. He began claiming that water service was a public utility that should be regulated by county government rather than managed by private dam owners who had conflicts of interest between profit maximization and community service. The breaking point came when Bradley organized what he called a water rights assessment meeting where he invited county officials, his residents, and local media to discuss what he termed monopolistic water pricing that allegedly threatened affordable housing and community development throughout Jefferson County. That evening, as I stood on the dam's observation deck watching sunset reflect off 847 acres of mountain water, while listening to the gentle sound of spillway flow that had sustained our valley for over a century, I realized that Bradley had made a fundamental miscalculation about his position in our relationship. He'd assumed that his development's economic importance and political connections would give him leverage to renegotiate water contracts on terms more favorable to his profit margins. What he didn't understand was that water rights in Colorado are property rights that predate development rights, and dam owners have legal authority to terminate service to communities that violate water supply agreements. Bradley's final mistake was underestimating his opponent while simultaneously providing me with evidence of systematic violation of water conservation requirements and contractual obligations that gave me legal grounds to terminate water service to his entire development. He thought he was pressuring some rural water supplier who could be intimidated through political pressure and media manipulation. What he'd actually done was declare war on the Army Corps of Engineers colonel, who controlled the only water source for his 900-home development, giving me legal justification to shut off water service to his entire community, while demonstrating to other potential customers the consequences of violating water rights agreements with Harrison Dam. Bradley's first official assault came on a sweltering Tuesday morning in July, when I found him standing beside my property's water meter with his clipboard pink dress shirt, already showing sweat stains, as he photographed the irrigation system that watered my vegetable garden while speaking into a digital recorder about excessive water consumption that violated community conservation standards. The smell of his cologne mixed with the scent of tomato plants and morning irrigation spray as he scribbled notes, with the intensity of someone documenting environmental crimes against suburban water management. "Morning, Colonel Harrison," he called out with fake friendliness, his voice carrying across my property line. "Just conducting the quarterly water usage assessment required by county conservation regulations. Your irrigation system appears to violate several recently implemented water restriction protocols that protect community resources during drought conditions." The violation notice he handed me was professionally printed on Pine Ridge Estates letterhead, complete with County Water Authority citations and a 14-day deadline for compliance. The document was a masterpiece of bureaucratic intimidation, citing water conservation ordinances, drought emergency protocols, and community resource protection requirements that supposedly applied to my property despite my being the dam owner who supplied water to his entire development. Bradley had done extensive research, consulting with water attorneys, conservation specialists, and county officials to create the appearance of legitimate regulatory authority while systematically targeting the very person who controlled his development's water supply. The violations ranged from excessive agricultural irrigation to non-essential water usage, to what he termed wasteful consumption patterns that allegedly threatened community water security during drought conditions. Each violation carried fines ranging from $500 to $2,000, with daily accumulation until compliance was achieved through either expensive irrigation modifications or complete elimination of agricultural activities that had sustained my family for 5 generations. The total potential penalties exceeded $18,400, obviously calculated to force either ruinously expensive compliance or surrender of water rights that predated his development by over a century. The genius of Bradley's strategy was its systematic complexity designed to overwhelm water rights holders with technical requirements that appeared legitimate while actually violating established water law that protected senior water rights from interference by junior users. Most people would be intimidated by conservation citations, confused by drought emergency regulations, and financially pressured by accumulating penalties that threatened their ability to use water they legally owned. What Bradley didn't realize was that he'd just handed detailed evidence of his systematic harassment campaign to the Army Corps of Engineers colonel, who supplied water to his entire development under contracts that included specific provisions about respecting senior water rights and avoiding interference with agricultural operations that predated suburban development. My 38 years of water management experience had taught me to recognize coordinated attacks on water rights, and Bradley's operation displayed all the hallmarks of systematic harassment designed to pressure water rights holders into surrendering their legal protections through bureaucratic intimidation and financial pressure. The harassment campaign expanded throughout July as Bradley recruited county officials, environmental groups, and community activists to join his systematic documentation of alleged water waste that would justify intervention in agricultural water usage that threatened suburban water security. County Water Commissioner Gerald Morrison began photographing my irrigation systems, claiming authority to assess agricultural water usage for compliance with drought emergency protocols. Environmental activist Sandra Phillips conducted what she called conservation assessments of my agricultural operations, documenting water usage patterns that allegedly violated community conservation goals. The coordinated nature of their activities revealed this wasn't random environmental advocacy, but an organized campaign to eliminate agricultural water usage that competed with suburban consumption. My water rights expertise had taught me to recognize conspiracy when I saw it, and Bradley's operation displayed classic characteristics of systematic harassment campaigns that developers used to pressure senior water rights holders into surrendering their legal protections through fabricated conservation emergencies and regulatory intimidation. The escalation continued when Bradley began filing complaints with state and federal agencies about my agricultural water usage, demonstrating either remarkable ignorance of water law or criminal intent to interfere with senior water rights through false reporting to government authorities. The Colorado Water Conservation Board received detailed reports about excessive agricultural irrigation that allegedly violated state drought emergency protocols. The Environmental Protection Agency got complaints about my agricultural operations supposedly violating federal water quality standards, when my water treatment systems exceeded federal requirements and had been continuously certified by state authorities for over 2 decades. The Army Corps of Engineers was told my dam operations violated federal flood control regulations, despite my having current permits and safety certifications from all appropriate agencies. Each federal complaint triggered investigations that forced me to take time away from water management duties to meet with federal inspectors, provide documentation proving Bradley's allegations were false, and defend water rights that were clearly established in Colorado water law. The irony was devastating. While I was managing water supplies for over 12,000 homes, some suburban developer was systematically abusing federal agencies to harass the person who kept his community from dying of thirst. Bradley had essentially weaponized the regulatory inspection process, turning water conservation agencies into unwitting accomplices in his harassment campaign, designed to pressure me into surrendering water rights that protected agricultural operations and senior water claims that predated his development by over a century. The psychological warfare intensified when Bradley began organizing community water conservation meetings to discuss what he called agricultural water waste that threatened suburban water security and property values. These gatherings, held in Pine Ridge Estates Community Center, featured PowerPoint presentations about declining water levels, conservation requirements, and resource allocation policies that allegedly justified restricting agricultural water usage to protect suburban communities. Bradley positioned himself as the conservation advocate, fighting to preserve community water supplies against agricultural operations that wasted precious resources through inefficient irrigation and unnecessary crop production that served no essential community purpose. The meetings were carefully orchestrated propaganda sessions designed to build resident support for aggressive action against agricultural water usage, while creating political cover for his harassment campaign. By framing my century-old agricultural operations as threats to their suburban water security, Bradley transformed ordinary residents into willing participants in his campaign to eliminate senior water rights that interfered with maximum suburban water consumption. They began filing their own complaints, demanding official action against agricultural water usage, and creating the appearance of widespread community concern about water conservation. The financial pressure escalated when Bradley's development began assessing what they called water conservation impact fees against my property, claiming these fees were authorized by county drought emergency protocols and required to fund conservation measures necessitated by agricultural water usage that allegedly threatened community water security. These fees, totaling $7,200, were allegedly required to fund additional water storage and conservation infrastructure necessitated by my agricultural operations that supposedly reduced water availability for suburban use. The assessments came with legal threats about water service termination and conservation enforcement if payment wasn't received within 30 days. The breaking point came when Bradley filed a formal petition with Jefferson County claiming my agricultural water usage constituted a public nuisance, requiring immediate intervention under drought emergency authority that would force elimination of agriculture. The moment Bradley filed that fraudulent water conservation petition claiming my agricultural usage threatened his development's water security, he crossed the line from harassment into criminal interference with senior water rights, and my 4 decades of Army Corps of Engineers expertise kicked into full legal mode that would systematically destroy his entire development's water supply. I spent the following weekend in my ranch office, surrounded by water rights documentation, federal dam regulations, and the comprehensive water supply contracts I'd maintained as dam owner, building what water rights attorneys would later call the most thorough water theft case in Colorado history. The smell of old legal documents and engineering reports filled the room as I methodically traced every aspect of Bradley's systematic campaign against adjudicated senior water rights. But my real weapon was something Bradley had never considered: the original 1892 adjudicated water rights deed that contained specific language about what happened when someone interfered with senior water claims established under federal homestead programs. What Bradley didn't know was that Colonel Samuel Harrison had literally written the Army Corps of Engineers' water rights protection protocols he was about to face, including developing the federal guidelines that made exactly his type of illegal water diversion a federal felony with mandatory minimum sentences. My investigation began with Bradley's conservation petition itself, and the document was a masterpiece of criminal fraud that would destroy him in federal court. He'd claimed my agricultural irrigation threatened community water security when my usage represented less than 3% of total reservoir capacity, cited conservation emergencies that didn't exist according to state drought monitoring, and sworn under oath to water shortage conditions that contradicted his own development's excessive consumption patterns, documented by my SCADA monitoring systems. But the real bombshell was what I discovered when I analyzed Bradley's actual water usage compared to the conservation standards he claimed to support. Pine Ridge Estates was consuming 340% more water than the conservation levels specified in our supply contract, primarily through luxury amenities like swimming pools, extensive landscaping, and irrigation systems that Bradley had installed without required conservation technologies. The federal implications became clear when I traced Bradley's financing sources for his harassment campaign through water industry contacts and federal dam oversight agencies. Bradley had been diverting HOA fees and development funds to pay for legal services, environmental consultants, and what he called water rights advocacy, without resident knowledge or federal disclosure required for developments that depend on private water supplies. When water supply harassment involves federal agencies and crosses state lines through interstate water compacts, it triggers federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act and federal dam safety regulations that make interference with private water supply operations a federal crime carrying serious penalties, including criminal prosecution and mandatory restoration of damaged water rights. My analysis of Bradley's complaint pattern revealed something even more damaging than simple harassment. He'd been filing false reports with federal water agencies, including the Bureau of Reclamation, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Environmental Protection Agency, claiming my dam operations violated federal water management regulations that actually protected my rights as senior water holder and dam owner. Each false federal report constituted mail fraud and wire fraud, both federal felonies carrying up to 20 years in prison when part of systematic schemes to interfere with private water supply operations. Bradley had essentially been committing federal crimes monthly for over 8 months, creating a paper trail that federal prosecutors would later describe as the most well-documented water rights interference case in Western water law history. The conspiracy extended beyond Bradley to include county officials who'd participated in his harassment campaign through fabricated conservation enforcement that violated established water law. County Water Commissioner Gerald Morrison had been filing false conservation violation reports in exchange for consulting contracts with Bradley's development company worth over $47,000 in undisclosed payments. Environmental activist Sandra Phillips had been coordinating with Bradley to file fraudulent water waste complaints with federal agencies while receiving payments from his development funds for what she called conservation advocacy services that actually constituted criminal interference with senior water rights protected under federal and state law. My investigation revealed the true scope of Bradley's water rights interference network when I discovered his correspondence with similar development operations throughout Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. Through my professional connections with other Army Corps of Engineers colleagues and water rights holders, I learned that Bradley had been sharing tactics for targeting senior water rights holders, coordinating harassment strategies against agricultural water users, and providing training materials for eliminating agricultural water usage through systematic regulatory harassment. Bradley wasn't just a local developer. He was a regional coordinator in systematic interference with senior water rights designed to maximize suburban water consumption through elimination of agricultural water usage that competed with development profits. The network included corrupt officials in multiple states, fraudulent environmental groups that filed false conservation complaints, and sophisticated legal services that specialized in harassing senior water rights holders. The evidence compilation revealed systematic water rights interference that extended far beyond my agricultural operations to include targeting of water rights holders based on their agricultural usage, senior water claims, and resistance to development pressure that sought to eliminate established water rights for commercial profit maximization. The money trail uncovered through my investigation revealed Bradley's operation was more sophisticated than typical development harassment. He'd established multiple LLCs to hide his water rights interference activities, created false environmental documentation to support conservation complaints, and coordinated with corrupt officials who were expediting regulatory harassment in exchange for development consulting contracts. My professional connections provided access to investigative resources that Bradley never anticipated. The FBI's Environmental Crime Unit was immediately interested when I provided evidence of systematic interference with private water supply operations affecting multiple states and federal water management systems. The U.S. Attorney's Office assigned prosecutors who specialized in water rights crimes and had been building cases against criminal organizations that targeted senior water rights holders for commercial development purposes. The Environmental Protection Agency's Criminal Investigation Division opened investigations into systematic filing of false water quality reports designed to harass private dam owners. Most importantly, the Colorado Attorney General's office began examining systematic corruption in county water management that had enabled Bradley's criminal organization to operate with official protection, while interfering with senior water rights that predated suburban development by over a century. Bradley's harassment of one Army Corps of Engineers colonel had triggered investigations by multiple federal and state agencies specializing in water rights protection and environmental crime prosecution. The surveillance operation I coordinated through federal water management authorities revealed Bradley's activities extended far beyond what I'd witnessed personally. He was conducting systematic research on senior water rights holders throughout the region, attempting to identify vulnerable agricultural operations that could be eliminated through harassment campaigns designed to force water rights transfers at below-market prices. Bradley had escalated from development pressure to what federal investigators classified as organized water rights theft, using systematic harassment to eliminate senior water claims while corrupting local government to provide legal cover. The most damaging evidence came when federal investigators uncovered Bradley's connections to anti-agricultural extremist groups that opposed senior water rights and sought to eliminate agricultural water usage through systematic harassment disguised as environmental conservation and community water protection. The network included individuals with histories of anti-agricultural activities and documented hostility towards senior water rights that protected agricultural operations from suburban development pressure. Bradley's operation was funded by organizations that opposed agricultural water usage and sought to eliminate senior water rights through systematic corruption of local government and harassment of water rights holders. The evidence compilation took 7 months and filled 38 bankers' boxes with documents, recordings, water usage data, and digital evidence that would destroy Bradley's criminal enterprise. The federal grand jury that reviewed the evidence returned indictments against Bradley and 19 co-conspirators on charges including racketeering, systematic interference with water rights, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and criminal theft of water services. Bradley faced additional charges for filing false federal reports about dam operations, systematic harassment of senior water rights holders, and conspiracy to defraud federal water management agencies through coordinated false reporting designed to interfere with private water supply operations that served over 12,000 homes throughout Jefferson County. My role in the investigation had to remain confidential until arrests were completed, which meant continuing to supply water to Bradley's development, while federal agents gathered additional evidence of his criminal enterprise. But every false complaint he filed, every fraudulent conservation report he created, every threatening communication about water rights was being monitored and documented by federal investigators. Bradley thought he was pressuring me into surrendering agricultural water rights through systematic conservation harassment and regulatory intimidation. What he was actually doing was providing federal prosecutors with overwhelming evidence for criminal cases that would send him to federal prison, while giving me legal justification to terminate water service to his entire 900-home development for systematic violation of water supply agreements and criminal interference with dam operations. Bradley's desperation reached criminal insanity when he decided to escalate from harassment to actually shutting off my water service. And the morning he made that fatal mistake, federal agents were already positioned throughout the area to document every federal crime he committed against protected water rights operations. It was August 22nd, a scorching Tuesday morning with temperatures already climbing toward 95 degrees, when Bradley arrived with his maintenance crew, 2 security guards, and what he claimed was county authority to terminate water service to agricultural operations that violated drought emergency conservation protocols. The smell of diesel exhaust and hydraulic fluid mixed with his expensive cologne as he stood there in his pink dress shirt and black dress pants, clipboard pressed against his chest like armor. Absolutely convinced, he'd found the regulatory authority to cut off water service to the Army Corps of Engineers colonel who controlled his entire development's water supply. What Bradley didn't know was that FBI agents were recording everything from 4 different surveillance positions. Federal water management investigators were documenting violations of dam safety regulations. And I was coordinating the investigation that would capture every word of his confession to criminal interference with federally regulated water supply operations. The fake county water termination order was a masterpiece of criminal forgery, complete with official Jefferson County seals, water commissioner signatures, and legal citations that would have convinced most property owners they'd lost their water rights through legitimate drought emergency enforcement procedures. Bradley had obviously invested significant money in creating convincing county documentation, hiring what appeared to be legitimate maintenance personnel, and coordinating what looked like official water service termination procedures. My 4 decades of Army Corps of Engineers experience had taught me to recognize fraudulent water authority documents, and Bradley's forgery was obvious to anyone familiar with actual county water procedures. The case number didn't match county formatting standards. The signatures were clearly traced from publicly available documents, and the legal citations referenced drought emergency powers that didn't exist under Colorado water law. Bradley had essentially forged county water authority documents, while simultaneously proving he had no legal power to interfere with senior water rights that predated his development by over a century. The maintenance crew Bradley had hired were legitimate professionals who'd been deceived about the nature of their assignment through his fraudulent county documentation. They'd been told they were enforcing drought emergency water restrictions under county authority and had no idea they were participating in criminal interference with federally protected water rights operations. When I calmly explained that the termination order was fraudulent and they were being used to commit federal crimes against protected water supply operations, the crew supervisor immediately ordered his workers to stop. "Colonel, if there's any question about water rights authority, we're not touching dam operations," he said, backing his equipment away from my water systems while Bradley screamed threats and accusations. "We don't interfere with senior water rights for nobody, especially not with fake county paperwork that could land us in federal prison." The federal recording equipment I was wearing captured Bradley's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control of his failing water termination scheme as his criminal conspiracy collapsed in real time. "This is legitimate county drought emergency authority," he screamed, his voice rising with panic as the maintenance crew refused to participate in his water rights interference scheme. "I have full county power to terminate water service to agricultural operations that violate conservation protocols during drought emergencies. If you interfere with official water conservation enforcement, you'll face additional charges for obstruction of justice and violation of drought emergency regulations designed to protect community water supplies." Every word was being recorded by federal agents, who would later testify that Bradley had confessed to multiple federal crimes while attempting to interfere with protected water rights operations using forged county documents and fraudulent emergency authority that violated federal water management regulations. Bradley's backup plan revealed the true scope of his criminal desperation when he produced what he claimed were federal drought emergency orders, requiring immediate termination of agricultural water usage to protect community water supplies during national water shortage conditions. The documents, allegedly from the Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps of Engineers, ordered immediate cessation of all agricultural irrigation to preserve water for essential suburban use. Bradley had forged federal water management documents, complete with official letterhead and federal agency seals, creating evidence of federal crimes that carried mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years in federal prison for each forged document used in water rights interference schemes. The psychological warfare escalated when Bradley began making threats that revealed his knowledge of my position as dam owner and his belief that drought emergency authority superseded senior water rights established under federal and state water law. "You think your dam ownership will protect you," he said, pointing aggressively while his pink dress shirt stretched across his gut, sweat pouring down his face despite the morning hour. "But drought emergency regulations and community water conservation override individual water rights. Your senior water claims don't extend to wasting water during emergency conditions that threaten community survival. Bradley had just admitted he knew I was the dam owner while simultaneously threatening to use fraudulent federal documents to interfere with water rights that were protected under federal law and state water compacts that predated his development by over a century. The federal recording equipment captured Bradley's detailed knowledge of water rights law, his systematic plan to eliminate agricultural water usage, and his belief that suburban development interests could override senior water rights through fabricated drought emergencies and forged federal authority. The climax came when Bradley ordered his remaining accomplice, Gerald Morrison, to begin physically disconnecting my water distribution systems using wrenches and pipe cutters, despite the maintenance crew's refusal to participate in criminal water rights interference. Gerald, apparently unaware that federal agents were watching from multiple positions, began attempting to shut off water valves while Bradley supervised with his clipboard and measuring equipment. The federal recording equipment captured Bradley's detailed instructions about which water systems to disconnect first, where to install flow restriction devices, and how to document the water termination for his fraudulent county records that would justify systematic interference with protected water rights operations. Bradley was essentially directing criminal interference with federally protected water supply operations, while federal agents documented every aspect of his criminal enterprise that violated multiple federal statutes protecting senior water rights from harassment and interference by junior water users. The federal agents moved in when Bradley began personally attacking my water control systems with pipe wrenches, transforming his fraud scheme into actual destruction of federally regulated water supply infrastructure. Special Agent Maria Rodriguez approached Bradley with her credentials displayed, her voice calm and professional as she explained that he was under federal surveillance for water rights interference and was now being arrested for additional federal crimes. The color drained from Bradley's face as he realized his theatrical water termination had been a federal sting operation designed to catch him committing crimes against protected water rights, while federal prosecutors built cases that would send him to federal prison for decades. Bradley's arrest was captured on multiple federal recording devices, as agents documented every aspect of his criminal operation designed to interfere with senior water rights through systematic harassment and fraudulent authority claims. His pink dress shirt was soaked with sweat as Agent Rodriguez read him his rights, while other agents photographed the forged federal documents, secured the damaged water infrastructure, and arrested Gerald Morrison for participating in criminal interference with protected water supply operations. The federal investigation expanded dramatically when agents discovered Bradley's coordination with similar water rights interference operations throughout multiple western states, revealing that his harassment of me was part of a systematic criminal enterprise that specialized in eliminating senior water rights through harassment campaigns designed to maximize suburban water consumption. Bradley hadn't just been harassing one Army Corps of Engineers colonel. He'd been running a criminal organization that specialized in interfering with the federal courthouse in Denver had never seen anything quite like United States v. Bradley Whitmore and Associates. And the irony wasn't lost on anyone that Bradley would be facing sentencing for systematic water rights interference, while his entire 900-home development faced mandatory evacuation because the Army Corps of Engineers colonel he'd harassed had legally terminated water service to every house in his community. The courtroom was packed with water rights attorneys, agricultural advocates, federal agents, and residents of Pine Ridge estates who'd come to witness what prosecutors called the most comprehensive water rights interference prosecution in federal court history. Bradley sat at the defendant's table in his orange prison jumpsuit, his pink dress shirt and black dress pants replaced by federal detention clothing, looking like a deflated balloon as he faced the consequences of targeting the wrong dam owner with his systematic campaign against senior water rights. I'd maintained water service to his development throughout the investigation, but federal sentencing guidelines and water rights law required my testimony about the scope of his criminal activities and their impact on water supply operations serving over 12,000 homes. Chief Judge Robert Harrison, himself a descendant of Colorado water rights pioneers who understood the sacred nature of senior water claims, would be handling Bradley's sentencing with the kind of judicial precision that makes federal sentences educational experiences for water rights criminals. The smell of furniture polish and water law precedent filled the courtroom as Bradley's attorney, an overworked public defender named James Martinez, prepared to argue for mercy in a case where mercy would be both inappropriate and devastating to water rights protection throughout the American West. The evidence presentation took 9 days and filled the court record with overwhelming documentation of Bradley's systematic water rights interference criminal enterprise. Federal prosecutors presented 1,847 pieces of evidence, including the wire recordings of Bradley confessing to federal crimes while attempting to shut off my water service, photographs of his forged federal documents, financial records showing $2.3 million in development profits generated through water rights harassment, and testimony from 37 water rights holders who'd been targeted by Bradley's systematic interference campaigns. The scope of his criminal organization was staggering, involving corrupt officials in 6 western states, fraudulent environmental groups, and a sophisticated network designed specifically to eliminate senior water rights that interfered with suburban development while stealing agricultural water for maximum commercial profit. My victim impact testimony provided the court with detailed analysis of Bradley's criminal methods and their broader implications for water rights protection and agricultural survival throughout the Colorado River Basin. "Your Honor," I began, addressing Judge Harrison while Bradley squirmed in his seat, "the defendant didn't just attempt to steal my agricultural water through fraud and intimidation. He systematically undermined water rights law by targeting senior water holders with criminal harassment designed to eliminate agricultural water usage that competed with suburban consumption patterns that maximize development profits. His actions represent domestic terrorism, specifically targeting agricultural water rights, and his criminal organization poses ongoing threats to food production and water supply security throughout the western United States. The water rights he attacked have sustained agricultural operations for over a century, and his systematic interference threatens the foundation of water law that protects agricultural communities from urban development pressure." The financial destruction was swift and comprehensive, as federal forfeiture proceedings seized every asset Bradley had acquired through criminal activity. His Pine Ridge Estates development, valued at $340 million, was subject to complete evacuation and abandonment because it was built using proceeds from water rights interference and depended entirely on water service from the dam owner he'd criminally harassed. His personal mansion, luxury vehicles, investment accounts, and development company assets were liquidated to fund water rights restoration and restitution payments to the 37 agricultural operations he'd victimized through systematic harassment designed to eliminate senior water claims for suburban development profit maximization. But the most devastating consequence was what happened to his 900-home development when I exercised my legal authority as dam owner to terminate water service to Pine Ridge Estates for systematic violation of water supply agreements and criminal interference with dam operations. Under Colorado water law, water suppliers have absolute authority to terminate service to developments that violate supply contracts through harassment of water rights holders. The water termination notice I served on Pine Ridge Estates was immediate and permanent, cutting off water service to all 900 homes while Bradley sat in federal prison facing decades of incarceration for water rights crimes. Without water, the entire development became uninhabitable, worthless, and subject to mandatory evacuation by Jefferson County health authorities. 900 families who'd invested their life savings in Bradley's luxury development discovered that their homes were worthless without water service, and their only recourse was civil lawsuits against Bradley's bankrupt development company for fraud, misrepresentation, and failure to disclose that their water supply depended on maintaining good relations with senior water rights holders. The community evacuation was swift and devastating, as families loaded moving trucks and abandoned homes that had cost between $400,000 and $800,000, but were now worth nothing without water service. The development that had once housed 2,400 residents became a ghost town of empty houses with dead lawns and empty swimming pools, serving as a monument to the consequences of interfering with senior water rights. Bradley's co-conspirators faced their own federal justice as the criminal organization he'd built collapsed under prosecution. County Water Commissioner Gerald Morrison received 22 years for conspiracy and systematic interference with water rights, his public pension forfeited to pay agricultural restitution. Environmental activist Sandra Phillips received 18 years for filing false federal reports and conspiracy to eliminate agricultural water usage through criminal harassment. The corrupt county officials who'd enabled Bradley's water rights interference faced sentences ranging from 12 to 25 years for systematic violation of water law and conspiracy to eliminate senior water rights for commercial development profit. Bradley's water rights interference network was systematically destroyed by federal prosecutors who specialized in protecting agricultural water rights from urban development pressure. Judge Harrison's sentencing remarks became legendary in federal court circles for their comprehensive protection of water rights and agricultural communities. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, looking directly at Bradley as he sat trembling in his orange jumpsuit, "you have systematically victimized agricultural families through a criminal organization that specialized in water rights theft disguised as environmental conservation. Your elimination of senior water rights represents an attack on agricultural survival that threatens the foundation of food production and water law throughout the American West. This court will not tolerate such egregious criminal conduct that destroys the water rights that sustain agricultural communities and protect family farms from urban development pressure." The sentence was devastating and final: 34 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, followed by 15 years of supervised probation with restrictions on water rights activities, residence near agricultural operations, and involvement in any development projects that depend on private water supplies. Bradley would be 93 years old before his release, and federal probation conditions would prevent him from ever again engaging in activities that could threaten agricultural water rights. The civil judgment was equally comprehensive as federal court awarded $8.7 million in damages for water rights interference, systematic harassment of agricultural operations, and criminal elimination of senior water claims that belonged to farming families under federal and state water law protection. The legislative impact of Bradley's case extended far beyond individual justice as Congress passed the Agricultural Water Rights Protection Act, strengthening penalties for systematic interference with senior water rights and creating federal oversight of development projects that depend on private water supplies. The Harrison Amendment established criminal penalties for harassment of dam owners and systematic targeting of agricultural water rights. My dam continues to supply water to over 12,000 homes throughout Jefferson County, but Pine Ridge Estates remains a ghost town of empty houses that serve as a permanent reminder of the consequences of interfering with senior water rights. The abandoned development has become a case study in water law schools throughout the western United States, demonstrating the absolute authority of senior water rights holders and the devastating consequences of criminal interference with agricultural water operations. The annual Water Rights Day celebration at Harrison Dam draws agricultural families from across Colorado who have successfully defended their water rights against urban development pressure. Children play beside the reservoir that has sustained our valley for over a century, their laughter echoing across water that reflects the mountains where snowmelt begins its journey to agricultural fields that feed America. Bradley's story became a cautionary tale taught in water law and agricultural protection programs about the consequences of targeting senior water rights holders and the importance of respecting the agricultural water usage that sustains food production throughout the American West. His systematic harassment of one Army Corps of Engineers colonel triggered the largest water rights interference investigation in federal court history, destroyed a criminal organization operating across 6 states, and resulted in federal legislation protecting agricultural water rights from urban development pressure. The dam still holds 847 acres of mountain water behind concrete and earthwork that has weathered over a century of Colorado weather. The spillway still flows with the sound of water management that has sustained our valley since 1892, and the distribution systems still deliver life-giving water to communities that respect the senior water rights that make their existence possible. But now it also serves as a reminder that water rights are worth fighting for, that agricultural water protection can be achieved through federal law enforcement, and that justice sometimes comes